All right, hello everybody. We're going to be talking about John Wick 4 today. Um, it's been about a year, almost a year, since our last movie review, official movie review video on the channel. Alex, last one was Doctor Strange, last May. Um,
Oh, I can see why that was our last one. So I wouldn't want to.
yeah, so my phone's echoing. All right. So I mean, obviously, movie reviews aren't something we've been doing. We have been doing the initial thoughts in the shorts, which has been, just a fun thing to do. But we each did our own immediate reaction to this one in the shorts, and I said that I thought it was the best action movie since at least Mad Max Fury Road, if not even better than that. And you said it might be your favorite action movie ever. So I felt with such high praise that it would probably, justify doing an actual review to get a little bit deeper into our thoughts. We're going to be doing non spoiler here at first, and when we get into spoilers, we will have a little warning here that I'll put up on the screen. Looks just like this, so we'll announce that when it happens. But here at first, we'll do spoiler free in case you haven't seen the movie. You can decide if you want to based on what we say. But yeah, I mean, you want to get Alex. I want to ask you first. You're the one who made the bigger claim, it being maybe the best action movie you've ever seen. So go ahead and just your initial thoughts. Anything in particular you want to praise about it?
Really quick, best part was we didn't even talk about seeing this movie. Like I just, we didn't even say like we're gonna go see it. I just got out of it and texted you like, dude, that was the best action movie I've ever seen. You're like, I'm in it right now. I'm like, God, text me right after. But yeah, I literally went into this with like no expectations at all. I remember liking John Wick 3, but I just went like, oh, John Wick 4 is out. Like, I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I don't see a lot of trailers or anything. And yeah, and if you know me, and if you know from these lives, I have to go to the bathroom like every 32 minutes. And this movie, I didn't even realize it was this long. It's 2 hours and what, 49 minutes,
Yeah,
39 minutes.
yeah.
I stayed in the entire time. And I had like a drink that I was drinking while there's no point in this movie where I felt comfortable enough to leave. I'm like, this is too amazing. This is too much of like just a collection of like great effort from cinematography to stunt performances to act like I can't even like I'm trying to think of negative things, but it's like I was so like there's very few times where like I watch a movie and I'm 100% enthralled. It's like there's times where I'm like, oh, I got to do this after this. Oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Oh, it's like okay, I'm trying to guess at what I thought this movie was only 2 hours when I was in it. When I looked at the runtime afterwards, I'm like, what? So it's there's so little experiences I have where it's like I watch a movie and I'm in the movie per se. There's a lot of times where I just feel like I'm aware of everything else in life. So it was nice to experience that again in a movie where you kind of forget that life sucks.
Yeah, yeah, so likewise, I have been a big fan of the John Wick uh franchise, the trilogy before this one. In particular, John Wick Chapter 3 was the first one I saw in theaters back in 2019. The first two I didn't catch in theaters. I watched them, years afterwards, after, it did kind of get that hype and name and everything, and I went back and checked
Same,
them out.
same, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, these are both excellent. And I actually enjoyed, on first watch, I thought the second one was even better than the first. Looking back, I think the first one, is just such a simple story compared to where the franchise ends up going. But I loved both of them. And then when the third one came out in theaters, I was like, okay, this is probably the weakest of the three, but it was still great, still a good time, great action. It was a Halle Berry was in there for a little bit in that third one, and then coming into this one, I thought it would just be more of the same of like, okay, it'll still be good, but it's just another sequel. And then hearing such huge praise for it is what made me decide, like, okay, I gotta see this, opening weekend because I hadn't even planned on, like you said, making plans to see it or making a big deal of it, but just hearing so much praise, Rotten Tomatoes score so high, IMDb score so high, every review I see of it has been positive, so I decided to see it despite that long run time, and yeah, it was very possibly the best of the entire franchise. At the very least, I can definitely say it was the best sequel of the three sequels. The first one and this one are just so different. I'd have to rewatch the first again, but I just feel like going into the first one, it's almost completely different type of movie than where we are now. But where we are now in this fourth one is just over the top, and it's some of the best, most impressive action sequences and stunt work I've ever seen. So that's where the kind of the main base of my claim comes from. I've never seen another movie that has such incredible action sequences to where I was literally on the edge of my seat for near 3 hours, like you said.
Yeah, and like I was, it's almost comical that these action sequences go so long, but it's like I don't hate them. Like it's like like ridiculously long, but they're also creatively shot, and even though they're ridiculous, there's a lot of realism. You know, that's always been with John Wick. It's always very realistic with what he, you know, you always see him reloading. You know, you always see. I like the Kevlar suits because it's like it is ridiculous that exists, but it's like okay, they are like working within that realism. But if I have to say, like, everyone loves the guy, you can't not love the guy. But like anytime Keanu Reeves delivers a line, it's always so weird. Like even just yeah, it's like I don't know if that's just like he wasn't always like that. I feel like he was like more normal back in like the Matrix days. But I don't know. Like as he gets older, this and frickin' the Matrix, whatever the new one's called, like he just really only delivers lines that way.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I feel
it's
like
okay.
they definitely made it part of his character in the last couple, especially this one. I mean, I think if you go back even to the first one, he still has, you know, he's a quiet guy and everything, but he still has like normal conversations. And now it
His
is.
facial acting is great though. Like anytime he's not speaking, like everything conveys really well, in my opinion. It's just when he starts talking, it's like,
Yeah, I think they almost try to turn him into like this. He went from, you know, a guy who tragedies happened to him and he has to go back to this hitman lifestyle because of what happens to him in the first movie. And then throughout the sequels, now it's gotten to the point where now he's just John Wick. Like he's just this larger than life character. He doesn't really even have like those human you know, emotions or that human undertone still there for a lot of it. He's just this like killing machine, and they tried to throw back in the human element in this movie, but it's kind of like I don't know if it fully landed with me or not because it was like, yeah, I understand where this character came from and what he's been through, but you've turned him into such this like just killing machine. You know, it's like, does it really matter anymore? I think even in the last movie in John Wick Chapter 3, I won't go into major spoilers for any of the films, but for 3, it was really the turning point of going from this man who was just trying to like avenge what happened to him to actually turning back into this John Wick that we've heard about from back in, you know, before the movies took place, that they always like talk about this John Wick when he was in his prime. He kind of went back to that through the story of the third one. So for now, this one to go back to him again trying to leave the table or whatever is the, you know, the main thing he's trying to do here again. It's like, well, then in the last one you kind of went back into it, so I don't know, that was that whole part of it, but it doesn't even matter. It's like I don't even care because the whole movie is just like one exposition scene and then an incredible, you know, 20-30 minutes of action, then an exposition scene, then incredible action. So it's like, not that the story doesn't matter, but it's almost like I'm not going to sit here and complain about the story when it's the best action I've ever seen in a movie.
hmm in addition to the best action, I think some of the supporting cast is also really great and like shows many different layers of characters from Lawrence Fishburne to Bill Skarsgård to what's the guy that had the dog and then the blind guy
Oh, Mr.
from
Nobody.
Rogue. Yeah, Mr. Nobody and the blind guy from Rogue One. Like all their performances, all you know, I think all made up for the lack of an interesting character John Wick is. I mean, at this point, I feel like he's not getting the sport, but I felt like he's just like almost not defeated, but it's like at some point I'm like, what is he going for besides revenge? You know what I mean? Like they drive into him all the time. No matter what you do, you know, it's like they're gonna replace whoever you kill. But
Yeah, and it was
yeah,
Donnie Yen who played Kane, the blind character. You also had it looks like Shamir Anderson who was the tracker or Mr. Nobody. I loved that name, by the way, as he says in the movie. You know, everyone's like, "What's your name?" and he's like, "I'm Nobody." And then I don't know if it was Bill Skarsgård or who said it first, but they were like, "Okay, Mr. Nobody." And I'm like, "Oh, that's actually a pretty clever, you know, way to name this character, even though he's not even credited as that. He's just credited as tracker." But I
yeah, that's
was
weird.
I was afraid at first when they first reveal him and what his goal is. And it's not really a spoiler, but basically he's here to collect, you know, the bounty on John Wick like everybody else, but he wants to wait for that bounty to get high enough for it to be worth it for him. And at first I was like, "Oh, is this going to be one of those things where it's like, he kind of ruins the flow of what John Wick does?" But he really doesn't. I thought he added to it, and he wasn't overused, and they even kind of like change his motivations as it goes throughout the movie as a way to keep it fresh. And I was very impressed by all the side characters all kind of playing their part and doing good without taking anything away from the main John Wick story. And if this movie wasn't so long, if it was only 2 hours, that might not have been the case, right? Like it might have been like, oh, we needed more John Wick in this. So I think this was one of those rare cases where it needed, like, it deserved that longer runtime.
Yeah. And in what world did this guy be like, nah, 20 million's not enough? I mean, this looks like a poor dude. He has one gun and a dog. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean that's not enough? But that adds to that mystery of Mr. Nobody. So I like that a lot. There's some scenes in this where it feels like a video game quest. Like, oh, you can't do this until you go here and get this. And I was afraid for those moments. I'm like, oh god, it's a 30-minute side. But none of those side quests felt boring. Every set piece, I'm like, this is super interesting. Like the card game, that whole scene, that guy behind the table. I love all bit of that. But I'm running out of spoiler-free Steam.
Yeah. Well, let's
uh,
well let's just talk about in terms of the action sequences. We'll still talk in vague terms here. But for me, I got to point out my favorite one was the car roundabout sequence. And
mm, mm,
and I honestly couldn't tell at some points during this sequence where John Wick is driving in this vehicle and then there's a bunch of other cars going around what was real and what was like green screen CGI. Like either the special effects looked so incredibly good that I couldn't tell, or a lot of this was real, which if that's the case is literally insane because that would mean that you have like Keanu Reeves driving a vehicle with no doors shooting people and like running in between cars, going by. So some of it obviously had to be visual effects, but they were so good that I couldn't even tell what was fake and what wasn't.
yeah, and despite how ridiculous it is, it's also completely realistic that that traffic would just keep going. Like
Yeah.
nothing would stop it. Like I gotta go, I gotta get home, I gotta get to work, and just the craziness how he'd be like fist fighting with someone or in the middle of a gun battle, and then a car comes by and takes that person out. It's like what? Oh, and the amount of times like Keanu just gets wrecked, and it's like you almost get that little bit of like oh god, you almost bite it, that something's gonna happen, but
Yeah.
like you said in your short review, he's got a pretty good plot armor.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even just him anymore. I mean, almost every character in this movie, you have to really suspend your disbelief to kind of have fun with it because you have characters getting smashed by cars, getting thrown off of, cliffs of buildings, presumed dead, and then they just come back, and they're still alive. It's like literally, unless you put a bullet through someone's head, they're not dead.
The one stunt guy, I think he was like the main leader of like the Bill Skarsgård's clan, like the guy with like the goatee, kind of. I'm pretty sure I've seen him like, get killed like 3 or 4 times, and he just keeps coming back until the very end.
Yeah, the main bodyguard guy.
Yeah,
Me and my wife were joking about that because it's like every time something would happen, it's like, oh, he's not dead yet. He keeps coming back. And even like dogs have always been a big part of the John Wick franchise, but it's like Mr. Nobody is the main character who has a dog in this, and even his dog really goes through it to the point where you're like, oh man, that would take him out, but then the dog just gets right back up, and is barking, and it's like, oh, okay. So it's like, no, everyone's kind of invincible until you get shot in the head, I guess, in this movie.
yeah. Something happens to the dog. I think it's like thrown into a wall or something, and like my whole theater was like, like all this violence of all these people getting shot, murdered, stabbed, sliced. As soon as the dog hits the wall,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, but again, I say all this like in jest, like this isn't a negative of the movie. It somehow even makes it better. Like the movie has to live in this kind of unrealistic realm in order to be as good as it is. Because if you stuck to this more gritty, realistic action, like a Jason Bourne or something, for example, like you're not going to be able to get the absolutely amazing and crazy action sequences that we get because they're just not realistic. Like and something can be not realistic but still be really, really well executed. So I feel like that's the line this movie towed, and I would say 95, maybe even 100% of the time, it's on the good side of that. I can't really think of one action sequence where I'm like, oh, that's that's too much, or I don't believe that. As long as you can accept, look, these guys are not going to die until they're shot in the head. Everything looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I think the previous three movies help establish how ridiculous it is. You know, it slowly raises the bar every time. So by the time we get to this one, it's no matter how ridiculous it is, it's makes sense within this universe.
Yeah, I want to talk about Bill Skarsgård also. We mentioned him, but we haven't really gone into it. He was fine as far as his character. I thought his performance was great. He's a great actor. His character, though, he does just kind of play the role of like, hey, I'm the new villain in this movie. Like every John Wick movie, it's like, here's the new villain. Somewhat different motivation, maybe some different character traits, but for the most part, it's just the villain that wants to facilitate John Wick being killed. And I thought he played his role fine, but I don't think the movie really did him any favors in terms of trying to give him this like great character. You know what I mean? So it's like I went into it thinking like, oh, Bill Skarsgård, that's going to be a highlight of it. It really wasn't, but it's not like it was his fault or anything.
Yeah, his French accent was a little distracting as well. And it's like,
Is he
but
American, or is he? What is he?
what are the Skarsgårds? I know his brother sounds pretty American.
I'll look it up.
While you're looking that up, but yeah, I mean, I liked all the set pieces that he was in. Like he's in this great hall when he meets Mr. Nobody. He like booked his own like ballet performance of this empty theater. He's in this museum with all these crazy paintings. So I liked all that stuff. But I'm trying to remember what his motivation was besides just being like the top guy at that point.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, oh, you'll never be free, Mr. Wick. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, I think you guys would be better off just letting him go. Like the amount of bodies that have accumulated.
yeah. Honestly, how much of a loss here? Can we just can we just give up on it? Yeah. And they are Swedish, by the way, the Skarsgårds. So,
Sweet.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I get so we can start to jump into spoilers here, but I do just want to say last thing I love about the movie is that almost every John Wick, but this one especially, if you've watched the whole franchise, that's great. You'll get all the backstory, you'll get everything. But really you don't need to. Like you could really jump into any John Wick movie and pick up from wherever it's picking up at and know exactly what's going on and enjoy the whole thing. Like you could watch this 3-hour movie and there's like some lore and stuff in there, but it really doesn't matter. Like it's just like an action movie and this guy's trying to survive and killing all these people that he needs to. And the franchise does such a great job anytime a character is introduced to just like instantly build a backstory. Like they'll know who John is, John Wick will know who they are, they'll explain their backstory in like 5 seconds, like in one scene. And it's like you don't need to know anymore. And I think Kane, the blind character, is a great example of that. Like as soon as he gets told he has to kill John Wick as his target, instantly he has a history with him just by his reaction. When they first meet and start fighting, you can feel that history there. And you don't need the 3 other movies that he wasn't in. It doesn't matter. It's like they do a great job of that. And I think that's because the same guy makes all of these movies. Let's see, let's get his name
Same
here.
director.
Yeah, what was his name? Chad Stahelski.
Yeah, wasn't he the one who was also like a stunt person on the Matrix films? So that's why he has a relationship with Keanu.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that, but yeah, he directed all of them, and I think that shows. And even though each film kind of does have a little bit of its own style, this through line, is really impressive in the style and everything. But yeah, I'm ready to jump into spoilers unless you have anything else to say.
No, yeah, I was just gonna agree with you. Like I don't think I've seen number three since theaters. And doesn't three have like a surname like Parabellum, but this one doesn't for
Yeah,
some reason?
yeah,
That's weird. But yeah, I don't think I've seen it one or two probably since I saw number three in theaters, and I didn't feel like I was punished at all because it kind of was like they kind of quickly reminded what happened, and you just jump in and just those little short exposition, you get it.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, number 3 was called John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. And I remember
Hmm.
people roasting it so hard when it was coming out for why is the title so long and ridiculous. So I think they just gave up on the on the subtitle and they're like, we'll just call it like everyone knows John Wick at this point, so they're like, we'll just call it Chapter 4. They get it. I was looking up to see how well it did opening weekend. Um, Let's see here. Yeah,
Under
so
4.
it broke the franchise record, made 73.5 million opening weekend. Um,
Hell yeah.
Now it does have a $100 million budget, so it does have to make quite a bit of money to to make money on that. But I'm sure it will. But yeah, highest opening. So obviously you don't need the subtitle. It doesn't matter. You know, people will still come see it. And I guess that can lead us into the spoilers. So we're gonna go ahead at this point jump into the spoilers. So there's your warning there. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to be spoiled, like the video, come back, finish it later after you've seen it. We're gonna jump into it here, and that is your final warning. So now that we're in full spoilers, Alex, what's the first thing? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to bring up?
First of all, Rip Lance Reddick, who was the concierge named Sharon, and then when he dies 15 minutes into the movie, I'm like, oh my god, I got pretty emotional because
He's
fucking
dead.
guy died in real life.
And isn't
Yeah,
that crazy? The coincidence?
yeah, yeah. And all that stuff talking about like, oh, what do you think he wants on his tombstone? Friend, because he was that above all else. I'm like, God, because that's probably, and it was made before he died, obviously, and the fact
Yeah.
that that stuff's in there after he died in real, it's like, oh my god.
not
Uh
not even just that he died like after it was made. He died like last week. Like it's not like they had any time to change anything. You know what I mean? So it's like this movie was fully in the can. The odd coincidence that not only is he the one of the only characters that has like a actual death in the movie that's like focused on, but then the way they talk about him, it's like so crazy from like a premonition standpoint. It's like obviously nobody knew, and R.I.P. to him, obviously. But yeah, me and my wife were saying the same thing. We're like, that was almost uncomfortable. Like how crazy that was.
mhm. So we open up with Keanu Reeves training, which I don't think we really see before. So that's cool. I mean, all he did was just punch in a wall, and Lawrence Fishburne gives a ridiculous monologue, but that's okay. I just every time I see Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu together, it just makes me so mad at the new Matrix film for not, bringing them back when they could have. Because I believe Lawrence was just like, yeah, they didn't ask me. It's like, of course they didn't. Why would they?
Yeah. And they've done more of these movies together now than they did of Matrix movies together. So, I mean,
Yeah, four shit.
so that's interesting to think about too, even though obviously the Matrix is what everyone thinks of, with that duo. And I loved Lawrence Fishburne's character when they're in the. I texted you about this, but when they're in the boat talking about what to put on their epitaphs, and and then Lawrence Fishburne just goes, "King of the world, I had mine many years ago." It's just like he's just such a great character.
I just more studios would cast him and have him more fun. Just let him be ridiculous. Kind of like how he was in Predators back in 2010, something like that.
I,
Because he was ridiculous in that as well.
Another great laugh out loud moment from him for me was when so Bill Skarsgård blows up the New York Continental, which already I was like, oh shit, that's crazy. And then the manager, I can't remember his name, but he goes and meets Lawrence Fishburne, and he's like, oh hey, thanks for meeting me. And Lawrence Fishburne's like, yeah, us homeless guys got to stick together. I was like, that's hilarious.
That was great. I just love how in this world, like none of the spectators care.
Civilians,
Like
yeah,
an
they
entire,
don't give a shit.
yeah, it's like, well, gotta keep going. Like, typical New York, but that happens in the entire thing too. Like, I loved like the night. I think if they're in Berlin, they're in the nightclub, and like John Wick's fighting the big dude and all his henchmen. It's like everyone's still dancing. Like this is great. That's probably exactly how it would go too. It's like, oh fuck it, we're all high. What's going on?
Yeah, it's like no one. It's almost like this world exists in the world, but we're supposed to believe that no one cares and like or like doesn't notice it. Same thing with the driving sequence, right? Like you said, like no one's like pulling over. What the hell? Like there's no cops coming up. Like no, everyone just continues on while these guys are killing each other in the street.
Not my problem.
There was one
Okay.
moment. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say there was one moment during that, in particular, the car scene where I literally lost my mind. I'm not able to, perfectly remember it, but it was something where like three dudes got like taken out by cars while they were getting shot, and that was the moment where that for me, I was like, this is the craziest sequence I've ever seen. Like, not knowing what is an actual stunt person getting hit by a car versus like what is being special effects. Like it looked so good. That was pretty wild.
Yeah, they just kept going and going and going, but it never felt like dull. It just felt like, oh my, I mean, they weren't like one take. Obviously, they weren't, but it felt like a continuous scene. Like even though they weren't like one take shots, it felt like a very good continuation of the same moment. So all that was great. Okay, so first act. So we're introduced to John, and then I'm a little fuzzy on like the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's gonna be hard to remember a 3 hour movie, but he kind of disappears after that training sequence, and Lawrence Fishburne gives him his suit. He's not in like the beginning of the movie, and that's
Yeah, that's
why.
right. That's right.
That's why I said to you, I was like, "Oh, I was surprised you didn't get that 5 minute feeling," because we cut to, I don't know the exact order, but after that we cut to the manager at the Continental. We cut to Bill Skarsgård setting up his character. We cut
Right,
to a
right.
couple different things before we ever even get back to John Wick, and then it's like, I don't want to say the whole first act. That's too much, but uh, quite a while before he does finally come back in. In hindsight, I think they needed that because it set everything up great. But it's always scary when you like leave your main character for the whole beginning of the movie. I did get a little bit worried, but it ended up being for the best.
Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, you can't put too much on Keanu, not too much don't put too much dialogue on him. Like, let
True.
everyone else do it, and it worked. Then we're in Japan. Is that where the Osaka Continental?
Yeah, when he meets the other character, I'll look up his name, and his daughter, who they introduce. Um,
Yes, yes.
and by this point, they're already on the hunt, for John Wick. So the soldiers and everything appear at this Continental, and that whole sequence where you had like the people at the Continental with the bow and arrows up top, and all the lights went off, and then they had the fighting sequence. That was like the first big action sequence of the movie, and I thought it was really good as well.
Yeah, and you have those soldiers. Those soldiers come in with like, they're also like, all the dudes have the suits with the Kevlar. Then
Hmm.
like these other dudes come in that also have the face ones, and that creates a whole new problem because so many gunshots. They're shooting these guys in the head, but they're just like, buh, buh, it just bounces off. So they keep having to find creative ways to shoot under, and all the whatever jujitsu that John Wick does is just incredible. All of all of his rolls. So it's like hip grab, roll, arm grab, roll. It's like holy shit. Uh, One question: how does John Wick get everywhere? Like he's in Japan, then he's in Berlin. It's like this. He's just in an airport. Just
Just sitting in the
one
airport
ticket.
lobby.
Yeah. Do you have a license? Any luggage? It's like, and plus, especially with like those radio people, like that one black woman who you never saw her face. I thought
Yeah.
that was a great touch. Where it's like, guess what, everybody? It's gone up to 25, and just there's all these people just sitting at coffee shops with their headphones. They just sit there all day waiting. They're just all day, like those elderly people that sit on their porch. Are they just sitting there waiting for that announcement about how much John Wick costs to kill?
Yeah, yeah, and that it reminded me of, since we're in spoilers, I won't go too much into it, but in John Wick 2, he basically gets the bounty put on him at the end, to where everyone now on the table is going after him, and that sets up John Wick 3, right? But
Mhm.
when that happens in John Wick 2 is the first time you see like all of these people that you assume are normal civilians, and they all get like that message as like John Wick's looking around, and like everyone from like every store, it's almost like every person in the world is an assassin. It's like, who's not an assassin? Um,
You rarely see any real people in these movies.
yeah.
It's like they're all everyone's an assassin. Anyway, no one's a real person. They're all in this inner society. It almost makes me feel like they're in a world where there are no regular people because we never see anything regular going on.
Yeah, a smaller moment that wasn't really action that I really loved is when John Wick is challenging Bill Skarsgård to the duel, and they actually meet up, and they have like that ceremony or ritual where they like have all the metal cards in front of them, and they're like naming the stipulations and then flipping over the cards to see who has the higher number. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
the John Wick franchise kind of plays fast and loose with the rules per se. Like they always talk about the rules, but then like at the end of the day, the villain will just be like, "Oh, I don't care." So it's like they kind of do whatever they want. But it is neat when you actually see it play out, like the rules that they do have. And I really loved that when they were setting up the fight. That was a great touch to me, and I love how he's like, wins the duel, and Bill Skarsgård's like tomorrow morning, because he obviously wants to kill him, and John Wick's like right now. Like he just wanted to
Yeah.
do it right then, but then he loses. I loved that scene.
Yeah. Weapon of choice: swords, pistols, pistol. And I like how like he didn't lose everyone. Like they easily could have like rigged it where Bill Skarsgård had won. Kind of like I think that's what the card guy did during that scene. But we'll get to that. But I want to say that one of my favorite things about this movie is Mr. Nobody and Donnie Yen. I feel like they're John Wick split in two. Like I feel like Donnie Yen. I feel like Mr. Nobody's character is like that represents his relationship that he had with his dog. You know that whole relationship, and like Donnie Yen like represents like the possibility he could have had a future with like his family, maybe, or like having a loved one. So I felt like there was like two different versions of himself going after the shell of John Wick. Like those were all things he used to be. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know if that was the point, but I really like Donnie Yen's character. But I felt like if we had more scenes, maybe one more scene with his daughter, maybe that would affect it more. And maybe I don't know if they needed the whole thing with the Osaka Continental guy. I don't I don't know if they would have just combined those two characters. Was he was the Osaka Continental manager? Was he in previous ones or no?
I believe so. I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe he was. I think the main thing with that is that, you know, I don't know how much is going to go into future movies or anything, but they did have the whole setup with his daughter, and then the daughter obviously being pissed at Kane. Did you stay for the post credit scene?
I did. I looked up that there was one. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, I also didn't stay. I didn't stay as well. I mean, I've been in the theater for 3.5 hours with trailers. I'm not gonna, But I looked it up, and it's basically that daughter tracking down Kane at one of his daughter's like recitals, and that's the credit scene. Because Kane kills her father, so she wants to kill him in front of his daughter. It doesn't
Mhm.
show her kill him or anything, but that's where it leads, and I don't know if that'll pick up anywhere. But I will say that it's just nice little world building that you have this continental manager who really, at the end of the day, turns on the table or doesn't follow the rules because he has this friendship with John Wick, and his whole character was based around this brotherhood he had with him. He literally sacrificed his own life, and very likely his daughter's, even though his daughter survives, because of this connection he has with John Wick. I really like that, and also personally that action sequence with the where the lights go out and the bow and arrow guys are shooting down was one of my favorites. So like I'm glad it was kept in because I love just the addition of like you have the normal gun shooting and the blades and everything, and then every once in a while someone gets turned around and just hit with 3 arrows. It's just like a nice little added in to that action sequence. So I really liked that.
Yeah, and establish like the main uh, uh, like group guy. You know, catches an arrow like Loki and the Avengers and establishes him. But I just feel like the fight scene was great, but there's one scene where like the daughter is like stabbing some guy in the back, but he's wearing a Kevlar suit. So it's like, how is he? How do those knives go through that suit?
But he keeps
And then
like going though, right?
yeah, he's like he keeps climbing up. I'm like oh my god. Um, yeah, all that was great. So the whole thing is John needs to have a duel with this guy, but he needs to get back in the family. So we have a little side quest where he goes to Berlin, and I thought I would lose complete interest in this, but I feel like it led to one of my favorite scenes, which is the card game, where we have all three of our main dudes here: Donnie Yen, Mister Nobody, and John, playing against the Penguin slash Kingpin.
Yeah.
And I love that guy's performance. I just love how ridiculous it is, and every set piece feels so different. Like the lighting in every single one just feels like they're in a completely different place. And when they start fighting, and then the rain's coming down, and John's just and the way and the way the guy died, like I'm like, oh my god, this guy. Also, really quick, sorry, and the fact that you think he's just gonna be like, go fight him, and then all of a sudden he starts throwing high kicks and spin kicks. It's like, holy shit!
Yeah.
Like they went full on ridiculous with like everything.
Yeah, that guy was awesome, and I 100% agree with you. When he went to the church in Berlin and was, getting hung and everything, and I'm like, okay, like let's get moving here. What are we doing? And then when that sequence was one of the best in the movie. The card game itself, not even the action, but just like the card game where they're playing poker, and even the blind guy's playing. He can't even he doesn't even know.
How could he see the cards though? He like brings them up to his face. And he's like, 3 4s and a 6 or something. It's like, how?
Yeah, maybe he can just from feeling the cards he knows. I don't know, but the whole reveal of them all showing, they each have better and better hands, and then the Berlin guy has the 5 of a kind because he's clearly cheating. It's like it was such a great reveal, and then the payoff of John Wick then grabbing him and slicing his neck with the playing card, and that's how the action started. I was like, that's it almost felt like a video game side boss or something, you know, like it was done so well. And then their fighting, I agree, was also excellent. It was like having this huge fat guy, you know, also fighting him, it just like adds to something different. It's not just a kung fu guy or just an assassin. Now you got this huge Italian or you know Berlin, you know, mob boss guy like fighting you too. So yeah, I loved that.
Uh, yeah, but I will agree when John Wick was like in the noose. I'm like we know
He's not gonna die.
like
Yeah.
what if he's not gonna die there. I like the actress that was his opposer. She's been in a lot of stuff, Game of Thrones and Black Mirror. So she's great, but yeah, I just wish like okay, we know he's not gonna die. I just wish they could have done something, but didn't last too long, thank God. But yeah, so does this lead into one of my favorite shots, which is like the overhead shot,
Oh, in the
where
house.
yeah, like they're going room to room, and we kind of see Mr. Nobody and then John, and it's like the camera's like going over the walls into different rooms, like all one take too, I believe. It's like Jesus Christ, fucking incredible.
Yeah, that was insane. And again, another sequence where I don't know you'd think it's all real, I guess, but it's like some of that stuff. I was like, how'd they do all this? Also, one thing to mention in that scene is where John Wick gets like the fucking explosive shotgun or whatever that sets people on fire. Just another little
Yeah,
addition that is just amazing, and he's just shooting these people and they're blowing up. I'm like, this is crazy.
it's the best because it shows like Bill Skarsgård's guys like practicing with it, like oh yeah, and then John gets it in like 5 minutes. He's using it. It's like oh, it's a great establishment for John to use that weapon. But then there's also a great shot where like the dog gets like the Jurassic Park moment, with the raptor coming out the side. Like they do that
Hmm.
with like the dog. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then we get their little John Wick choosing to save the dog instead of shooting Mr. Nobody. So that sets up later with Mr. Nobody's about to kill him and the dog starts whining. It's like as if the dog would know. But everyone but everyone loves Keanu, it's fine.
Yeah.
So all that stuff is great.
And this is all happening you know, the car sequence we already talked about, this sequence, this is all during that time where the duel has been set, and now Bill Skarsgård is just trying to get him killed before he can arrive to the duel. And what
Hmm.
one thing I did think was funny was that this whole time, so you had the radio lady that you were talking about in the Eiffel Tower like saying where he was so the assassin kings can go get him, and it just kept cutting back to Bill Skarsgård like standing there listening to the radio, like looking at a map of the city. And like every time John Wick could get away, he'd get like mad and like, you know, knock over something on the map. But if you actually think about it, he's just standing there just like looking at this model of the city, like he's not seeing anything going on. So I'm just imagining Bill Skarsgård just like standing there in silence, just like looking at it, and then just like hearing the radio, just like he left, and it's just like he just like keeps staring. It's like what a boring
Yeah.
night that was.
Yeah, and he's talking to Mr. Nobody on the phone, and Mr. Nobody wants more money. And then so Bill Skarsgård smashes the cell phone, and later on, like a butler comes up with like a rotary phone. Just give me that.
Yeah,
It's like I shouldn't have done that. I gotta pay this guy more. But
yeah.
this leads to the stair sequence, which is I like everyone knows I like to laugh out loud, like But I was literally like laughing my balls off during the stair sequence because John works his way up. It's a long 5 minute scene, and all of a sudden more dudes pull up, and like it's almost he's got to be there by sunrise, and it feels like he's got 5 minutes left, and he's like kicked down, he's shot down the stairs with like a shotgun or something. Comically, like,
Yeah.
like I don't know if you've ever seen Black Sheep with Chris Farley, but there's a
Hmm.
scene like that where like he falls down the hill forever, and I'm like, oh my god, this is great.
Yeah, it reminded me, I texted you of like a Family Guy bit where it's like it just kept going and going. Like he made it all the way to the top of the stairs and it gets knocked down and he just kept going. I'm like, "Oh my god." Eh, Um and this was earlier, but reminding of that, I sent you the clip on TikTok of the behind the scenes. But the one stunt guy who, when they're fighting in the Osaka Continental, the one who gets thrown down the escalator, and you see him in the movie just like tumble down the escalator for a second, but in the behind the
Yeah, that's
scenes, you can
online. Yeah,
see, yeah, like it's an actual stunt dude who just tumbles down escalators. It's like, oh my god, it's like these people need more money and more credit.
Yeah, they need their own Oscar, their own Oscar uh, award, and definitely more money and recognition. I remember seeing that clip online. I'm like, holy fuck, dude! Doesn't matter how much you're wearing. He's going down. The escalator's moving too. So the fact that he was able to do that with a moving escalator and end up okay, I hope, be insane.
I was just thinking, thank God they kept it in the movie. Like, imagine you do that stunt and then it gets cut, cut from the movie.
Yeah, and it's so funny watching it without music, and it just seems so awkward because they're like, yeah, they're shooting the bow and arrows. It's just silence. I'm like, oh god,
Oh, in the clip.
sound is, yeah. This is terrible. It just goes how much to show the other half of the movie making sound is really important.
Yeah. And so then the stair scene, this is where Donnie Yen comes in and they actually work together to get to the top of the stairs. And I love when they were cutting up to the top with Bill Skarsgård and everybody, and they're like just sitting there and you just hear the gunshots and the screams. Like they know John Wick is coming, that was a nice touch. And then they do eventually make it up. And now this is where I'm actually interested what you think. So just to quickly go over it, they have the duel, him and Donnie Yen, who's in there for Bill Skarsgård. They're doing the duel. They shoot each other the first few times, but don't kill each other. And then on the third one, John Wick doesn't shoot in time, gets shot by Donnie Yen, and then Bill Skarsgård goes up to finish the job, and John Wick kills him there. After watching it and everything, I think they actually came up with that plan before even going into the duel. So like watching it, I was like, "Oh wow, like this is crazy." But now knowing how it turns out, it makes sense that they would be like, "Let's shoot each other but not kill each other these first two times. Third time you're going to shoot me but don't kill me and then I'll kill him." And still extremely risky because you're in a duel shooting each other from, yards apart. Also the guy's blind. So, he's it's very risky, but I think that that's what happened. I don't think it was just by happenstance, or that John Wick had this plan but didn't tell Kane. I think they were doing it the whole time together, and that's why afterwards John Wick's like, "You owe me one," because by doing that, he also got Donnie Yen free, from his debt to the table.
Mm. Yeah, that is interesting. Before this, they had that nice church scene together, where it's like, "Do you think your wife's listening?" No, but what if I'm wrong? And they're talking. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that'd be like a weird thing to plan, and like no, I mean, they're both amazing, marksmen and shit. So it's like it wouldn't be too hard to like get right. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like John Wick was ready to let go there, and just you know, Donnie has his wife. I mean, not his wife, his daughter, and everything. So maybe he was willing, as long as he gets to kill Bill Skarsgård and kill like he isn't the whole table, but part of the table, and like free both him and Donnie. I felt like he definitely did it on purpose, but I don't know if he did it as a plan with Donnie. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
I
just a
don't know.
theory. Yeah, I mean that could not be the case. That's what I took from it. I also want to touch on the scene you brought up because I loved that line when they're in the church and John Wick's praying to his dead wife or whatever, but he's not religious. And Donnie Yen's like, "Do you think she can hear you?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Then why are you doing it?" And he's like, "I could be wrong." And I'm like, holy shit! Like I've never even thought about that before. You know what I mean? It's like even if you don't believe in it, you could be wrong. It's like so I do it anyway just in case basically, and it's like as someone who like I don't pray or anything, but it's like it gave me that perspective of like, oh wow, I never even thought of it that way. So I really loved that scene too.
Yeah, doesn't believe it, but just for the off chance that he can communicate with his wife in some way is really touching. And also what he wanted on his headstone, just loving husband, nothing else. It's like,
Yeah.
damn. And I didn't know. I totally expected the ending of this to be like the ending of 3, where it's just like, oh, now something else is going on. But it's like, and when I heard there was a post credit, I was so worried. I'm like, oh, please don't tell me his hand comes out of the fucking ground
Like
or
was he
something.
a zombie?
Yeah,
No, it's like
or like the
Superman.
ending. Yeah. Or the Dark Knight Rises, where he's just like him and his wife are there. She's alive somehow.
His wife is also alive.
But no, I'm glad this is the end. I mean, sure, like the post credits sets up a spinoff, like, but I'm glad that John Wick's story is over.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. I don't think he's dead. I think
I hope he is.
I think he told the guy, "Hey, take me home." Clearly it like kind of shows, like kind of implies that he would be dead, right? And then there's the grave. I think he's done with the table. he got out of his like whatever. But like I said earlier, they don't really care about the rules. Like they put Bill Skarsgård in charge. He brings in Donnie Yen, and Donnie Yen's like, "I'm retired," and he's like, "Well, you're not retired anymore." It's like they clearly don't care. They'll do whatever they want as long as they can, bring you in. I think in order for him to truly be done, he does have to be dead, and he knows that. So I think he tells the dude, I can't remember. I'm gonna look up the guy's name real quick. The manager of the hotel. Let's see here. Ian McShane played Winston. Yeah, Winston. That's it. I think he tells Winston, "Hey, I'm gonna be dead," basically. And I think Winston's kind of like does the grave. He tells him what he wants on his grave. They make it, but I think John Wick is just like out in the in the woods. Who knows where he is? But he's just off the grid. To me, I mean, my rule is unless you see them die on screen, they're not dead. I don't think him just falling over and passing out is enough to convince me that he's dead. That's just me. Now, if they showed like his dead body at, when they were like burying him, it'd be one thing, but just cutting from him passing out on the stairs to now a grave, I don't buy that at all. And to look at it cynically, they're not ending this franchise that's making hundreds of millions of dollars. And like, not only are they not ending it, they're not going to leave it up to be some weird spin-off with a character people don't care about. They might also make that movie, the spin-off movie, but they're going to continue making this with him. No clue what the story would be or where it would go. Maybe it's not in 2 years, maybe it's in 5, 6, 7 years they make the next one, but I'm 100% convinced he's not dead.
And that makes me sad because wishing a character was dead, but like I don't know. I'm just taking it back to like when Logan died in Logan, and that whole ending for that character felt like so deserved, and I felt like John Wick, his whole thing was first when his wife dies and the guy kills his dog that was a gift from his wife, and that was his whole motivation in the first one, and his motivation just like evolved to just killing this table. But it's like I feel like at this point, like why would you keep going? I felt like this would be a good ending, but you're right. They're just gonna keep making more money.
I will say this though, I don't know the behind the scenes or anything. Obviously, there is a chance that, like with Logan, maybe Keanu Reeves is like, okay, this is it. You know what I mean? There is that chance, and that the movie is done so in a way to where they could never make another movie, and like it'd be with Keanu Reeves, and like it is an ending, but they didn't want to like shoot themselves in the foot to the point where they can't make another one without it not making sense. You know what I mean? You could conceivably make the next one if it were to happen, but at the same time, if Keanu Reeves truly is done, or at the very least doesn't want to make another one for 10 years or whatever, it is ended. So it's just a matter of time. I mean, we'll just see. I will still always believe this, though. I mean, they could never make a John Wick movie again. My headcanon is going to be that he's out living in the woods somewhere. I'm not convinced he's dead. But I do think that it very well could be the case. I just don't know. I haven't looked into it, so I don't know if they've talked about that at all. Obviously, they didn't want to spoil the ending of the movie, so they haven't been talking about that in the press.
Yeah. In my head, canon, he's dead.
You'd be like the Will Smith if they make another one. The Will Smith from I Am Legend. He's dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
Dead.
But like you always say, no one's ever really gone, right?
No one's ever really gone, unfortunately. But we didn't mention this guy at all. But Clancy Brown, Mr. Krabs. I love this character in this. Just straight down the middle guy, mysterious, who's just like table guy. I mean, I don't know if he's like above Bill, below Bill. Like he just seems like a mysterious worker for this underground society, and I loved everything he did. He just like completely straight. Like at the end, like, all right, John Wick, you're free. Good day, and he just leaves. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's something they've done really well with anyone who represents the table but isn't like the straight up villain. Like they don't care about anyone. Like he's working for Bill Skarsgård because that's who's in charge at the moment. But at the end of the day, he works for the table. Like they say throughout the movie, we're all under the table, right? So he doesn't care that he dies. He's just like, okay, let's move on, like you said. And I love the moment when they're there and he tells Bill Skarsgård like a man's ambition should never outweigh his worth. Trying to like even take him down a peg. And I was like, this guy's pretty good. I didn't know he was Mr. Krabs though. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. He should have been Bill Skarsgård's character and had that voice. Kill John Wick.
But yeah, overall, anything else you want to say with it?
just really quick, a little scene where Donnie Yen like puts up like the the doorbell things like throughout the thing. The rules with him and his blindness is a bit like up and down because at some points you feel like he doesn't need anything, but at some points, I like how he puts the doorbell thing so he knows like where to shoot. Just that little scene was nice in the kitchen. But overall, yeah, this might be my favorite action movie of all time. I haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road. I know I probably should, but yeah, this right now, in terms of just pure action, this is the one.
Yeah, I mean,
This is the one.
there's no one on earth that has seen every single action movie and has the objective ability to be like, hey, this is the best. You haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road. I haven't seen any Mission Impossible movie, right? So it's like there's plenty of movies we haven't seen, right? But I think for me, this is at least top five, top three I've seen, and I'm just curious to watch the original again because I didn't watch any of them leading up to this to compare, see if it ends up being the best of the franchise. But yeah, thank you, Dominic, for the donation. Appreciate that.
Oh, hey, Dominic, thanks, buddy.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who joined and listened to us here on the live stream of this, or if you're watching in the replay. Let us know what you thought of John Wick Chapter 4 if you saw it, or the John Wick franchise as a whole. Maybe this is something we do more of. I mean, if this was purely just an improv because we wanted to talk about this movie more in depth, obviously, we're not a movie review channel all the time. But if there's a movie we see, we have a whole ton to talk about. This is definitely something we can do, and doing it live like this just makes it a little bit easier, to just come on and talk about it rather than have to produce a whole video and stuff like that. So I like doing it this way. But yeah, that's all I got. What about you?
With all that, I have to give this movie an F. Nope, that's all I got.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys later. You want to do the outro, Alex?
Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Alex. This is Josh. We are the TA. We're content's made for absolutely everybody, but we think specifically made for us guys and hopefully for you guys as well. Thank you very much.